Ritualistic crimes. What are ritualistic crimes? Ritual crimes are more common than we think. They can be anything from graffiti to stealing in Western societies. But in other cultures across the world, these can include things like human or animal sacrifices, which aren't always illegal, and can be considered extremely transgressive. Dawn Perlmutter states, "Ritualistic crime is most precisely defined as any act of violence characterized by a series of repeated physical, sexual and/or psychological actions/assaults combined with the systematic use of symbols, ceremonies and/or machinations. The need to repeat such acts can be cultural, sexual, economic, psychological and/or spiritual." Essentially, rituals can be conceptualized as collective and integrated forms of action, and everyone has certain rituals they conduct on a daily basis. Things like brushing your teeth in the morning or putting the bins out every Thursday. Others include various religious rituals that can have positive effects. Or, on the other hand, rituals can have negative effects such as violence and murder. In this video, I will specifically be exploring ritualistic murder and serial killings. Ritual murder can be committed for either sacred or secular acts by groups or individuals. Ritualistic murders can often be carried out by practitioners of occult ideologies, such as Satanism and other magical traditions, or sexual sadists and serial killers who ritually murder their victims for various motives. Human sacrifices are an example of ritualistic crimes, performed by various cultures and religions throughout history. In sub-Saharan countries in Africa, people are killed for medicinal purposes. These are referred to as muti murders. For example, a man with several healthy children may fall victim to a muti murder because his genitalia would be considered a vital ingredient to cure another man's infidelity. Another example of this can be Aztec human sacrifices. These were done because the Aztecs believed the gods sacrificed themselves for mankind, so they would return the favour. The victim would be held down by several people, then their chest would be cut open, then their heart would be ripped out. Although these kinds of rituals may sound absurd, they were and still may be normal in some cultures, even though many have changed and evolved. Illegal ritual activities are often referred to as occult crimes, but this can actually be a misconception. The word occult actually denotes practices and religions that are fundamentally non-violent. Also, not all violent ritual acts are committed in the worship of religion. Ritualistic murders don't have to be inspired by occultism, but some are, like those of the Manson family. Charles Manson groomed and influenced his followers, also known as his family, to break into Hollywood homes and stab celebrities multiple times, leaving writing on the walls with their blood. Although, most rituals are significant and specific to the killer, which give them their seriality and distinctiveness. Like Ed Gein, who collected the bones of his victims and even made furniture out of them. And Ted Bundy, who performed post-mortem sex rituals with girls of similar appearances. In more contemporary societies, serial killings aren't often done for irrational reasons such as magic, but the rituals are more symbolic and expressive. This can be demonstrated in the case of Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, aka the Milwaukee Cannibal, conducted several rituals while carrying out his killings. These included rape, cannibalism, necrophilia, and even zombification. When Jeffrey was almost 4 years old, he was diagnosed with a double hernia in his scrotum, which caused him extreme pain. This may have provoked him to feel sexually inadequate and insecure in his later life. His parents gave birth to another child, and following the birth of his baby brother, Jeffrey became increasingly quiet and withdrawn. His mother Joyce was hospitalised twice for psychiatric problems, and eventually his parents went through a bitter divorce and his father Lionel remarried. Jeffrey did not have the easiest childhood. As a child, Dahmer was fascinated with insects and small animals and enjoyed taking part in dissections in science lessons, a common trait with serial killers. And as he got older, he started picking up roadkill from the highways to experiment with. His father Lionel was a scientist and encouraged this interest, therefore taught him how to preserve and bleach animals. Unaware that in the future his son would attempt to do this with humans, keeping their bones and other body parts as trophies, and dissolving the rest of their bodies in acid. In his teens, Dahmer discovered he was homosexual, being especially attracted to black African American men. This eventually meant that even his selection of victims was ritualistic. The typical way Dahmer would lure in his victims was through offering money for nude photographs or going to gay bars. He was not interested in seducing and forming an intimate relationship with these men, but merely to drug, rape and dismember them, sometimes storing various organs and body parts. All 17 of his victims were almost like experiments, dismembering them in various ways, attempting to store parts of their bodies and organs, sometimes eating them. Central to Jeffrey Dahmer's fantasies were control. He did not want to be subject to another's sexual desires. He wanted absolute control and was obviously willing to use fatal violence to achieve that control. Jeffrey had early fantasies about penetrating a hairless, muscular torso, sparking a necrophilia impulse, which he eventually partook in. Although Dahmer wanted sexual pleasure and gratification, he felt uncomfortable in receiving it from others when they were in control. This can be demonstrated by one of his earlier victims, Anthony Sears. Jeffrey invited him back to his, and Sears performed oral sex on Dahmer, making him feel uneasy. Jeffrey knew he wanted this company and intimacy, but he wanted more power over the situation. Afterwards, Anthony said he'd be leaving shortly, so Dahmer fixed him a cup of coffee, Anthony unaware it was laced with 7 sleeping pills. He then drifted off to sleep, leaving him in a calm and still state. Jeffrey wanted him to stay this way, therefore strangled him to his death. After dismembering him, Jeffrey painted Anthony's skull like he did with a few of his other victims. Jeffrey's rituals progressively became more sinister over the course of his killings. 14-year-old Conorak was the second victim to succumb to Jeffrey's zombification ritual, and he was actually a brother of one of Dahmer's earlier victims. Dahmer drugged Conorak and drilled a hole into the back of his head in order to pour hydrochloric acid into his brain while he was still alive, with hope that he would remain in a passive, zombie-like state. Jeffrey went out during this experiment to buy more alcohol. During this time, Conorak escaped. Roaming the streets naked, disorientated, and bleeding from the head, some women on the street spotted Conorak and called the police. But Jeffrey was able to convince the police that Conorak was his 19-year-old boyfriend and they just got into a drunken argument. Although clearly underage and unaware of what's going on, the police escorted him back to Jeffrey's apartment, where he can continue the process of zombification, but failed, eventually disposing of Conorak by dissolving his body in acid. Jeffrey would put his victims in various positions and then take photographs of them. It's said that sexually sadistic serial killers may leave their victims naked in sexually degrading positions after death, which is likely to symbolise the power the killer has over the victim, making them seem disposable with little decency and value, leaving them in a vulnerable state. And Jeffrey would take pictures to keep this memory alive. Jeffrey fantasised about creating a shrine. He planned and illustrated a table with several of his victims' painted skulls laid out across it, and a painted skeleton at both ends. Here's an idea of what it would have looked like if he wasn't caught before creating it. A shrine that would have symbolised the power and dominance he had over his victims, gained by several rituals.
I tried to create living zombies with uric acid in the drill. But it never worked. No, the killing wasn't the objective. I just wanted to have the person under my complete control to do with as I wanted.